So welcome everybody. We are going to be talking today, I'm going to be modeling for you a couple of comprehension strategies to support readers in a middle school classroom to be able to comprehend independently while they're reading. And the strategies I'm going to show you today, I'm going to model for you today, are based on the metacognitive skill of visualizing. That good readers are making pictures in their mind when they're reading, and that making those pictures also helps students connect to their schema. So all of that background knowledge, everything they already know that they're bringing to a text with them to make meaning in a text, it helps if they can get there through pictures. So we're going to do this two different ways. One we're going to do with poetry, and then I'm going to show you how you can do a storyboarding activity even with a chapter book to help students to access it. And when we get to the chapter book, I'm going to show you how to use the gradual release model as well. How to start with you as the teacher taking responsibility for the reading, then sharing some of that responsibility with the students, and then moving them into an independent reading situation where they're still applying the strategy, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you can use this visualizing strategy to help students to access their schema and make connections to poetry. And we're going to use, as a sample, we're going to use a poem by William Carlos Williams. If I can find it. There it is. We're going to use a poem by William Carlos Williams called The Great Figure. So I'm going to pretend you're my middle school students. Hey, Melissa, welcome. Come on in. Just have a seat right there. So all I need you to do, and this is what you'd say to your middle school students, all I need you to do is when I read the poem, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes while I read. And all you have to do is turn on your mental movie camera, okay? And you're just going to concentrate on what pictures, what images, what thoughts float across your mind as I'm reading this to you. There is no wrong answer. There's no wrong picture that could come into your mind when I'm reading. It's anything that when you hear these words, anything it triggers in you. And I'm going to read it to you twice so that you can really pay attention to those images in your mind. And I want you, as you've got your eyes closed and you're turning on your movie camera, I want you to think about your perspective. Are you seeing things as if you're looking straight at them? Are you seeing things as if you're kind of floating in the air looking down on them? Are things moving in your image, or is it more like a still scene? Can you hear anything? Are you imagining yourself maybe even smelling or touching anything? Anything that pops into your mind, you're going to try to pay attention to. Okay? All right, so everybody go ahead and close your eyes. This is called The Great Figure by William Carlos Williams. Among the rain and lights, I saw the figure 5 in gold on a red fire truck, moving tense, unheeded, to gong clangs, siren howls, and wheels rumbling through the dark city. Okay, that's the end of the poem. It's really short. I'm going to read it one more time. So this time you can maybe fill in some of those gaps. So close your eyes again and really get a sense of what you're seeing all around you. Among the rain and lights, I saw the figure 5 in gold on a red fire truck, moving, tense, unheeded, to gong clangs, siren howls, and wheels rumbling through the dark city. Okay, now before you talk to any of your table mates, on your blank sheet of paper, I want you to really quickly scribble down as much as you can remember from what you were seeing. If it's easier for you to even draw it or diagram it and label it, you could certainly do that. But you can just write it down in words too. As many details. If you saw a fire truck, was there anybody on it? What kind of street was it on? Were you standing on the fire truck, looking at the fire truck? Was there no fire truck at all? Okay? What was your perspective? Everything you can think of. Try to add descriptions of colors, sounds. What time of day was it? Were you imagining a particular time of day? Was it cold? Was it warm? Were you in the picture? Were you not in the picture? Was there somebody else in your image of it? Was it something totally random that you can't even understand why that popped into your head? Okay, about 30 more seconds. Just try to jot down, if you really close your eyes again and picture that scene, the size of things, the sounds you might have been hearing. See if you can add 1 or 2 more details. All right, I'm going to stop you there. Now, in a real classroom, this would be a great time to tell your table mates or partners to turn and talk so that everybody in the class got a chance to share what they were visualizing. But for our purposes here, could a few of you just maybe share some of the things that you were picturing in your minds so that we can get a sense of how different our different schema are and how they influence the way we hear poetry? Steph, thanks.
I was thinking of maybe it happening in like New York City, because I've been there so many times before, and with like the rain and the dark and everything, I was seeing like how the lights from the sirens were like just kind of like reflecting off of water and stuff.
Ooh, where was the water?
Like on the ground and everywhere because it was raining.
Okay, so there were like puddles of
Yeah.
water everywhere and the lights were shining on them?
Yeah.
And you said it was specifically, you knew it was New York City.
Yeah. That's
How many of you were picturing New York City? Oh my goodness. Over half of us were picturing New York City, right? Now, does it say anywhere in the poem that this is New York City? Does it even necessarily say, well, it says it's a dark city, right? But it doesn't say it's a big, huge city like New York. Why do you think New York popped into so many of our heads? And Stephanie, you kind of already gave me an answer to that, which was what?
I've been there so many times before.
You've had so much experience of New York City that your personal schema was influencing the way you heard this poem and the connections you were making to this poem. How about somebody who didn't picture New York? So Claire, you didn't picture New York?
No, I mean, I don't know where it was picturing, but it was like an older time period, like where there was cobblestone streets in New York, somewhere around there, but
Interesting. That's completely different. Now, why do you think your schema pulled up an image of cobblestone streets in an old European city? Was there a particular word that triggered that for you?
not really, but I feel like whenever there's poetry, it's like,
Ah, so it's just it's the schema you have around poetry in
Yeah.
general. For you, poetry is it's something old, it's something sort of European.
yeah.
It's not really contemporary for me. So just your whole experience with poetry influences the pictures you get when you hear anything. And I think, Melissa, you said you didn't see New York City either.
No, it's still, I saw Philly.
You saw Philly.
Yeah, my sister lives in Philly, so I'm there. I just hear like all the
Right.
places and stuff, so
Right.
just remind me of that.
Right. So again, for each of us, our life experiences are going to color and transform the way we experience what a poet has captured in words. What else? What else were you picturing? What were some of the other things you saw? So we had puddles on the ground and the light flashing off of it. Again, even though nowhere in the poem does it say there's anything about puddles. Other things that you saw, other details? What were you seeing, Nicole?
I saw like an abandoned alley in the city with like one person standing there as a fire truck was passing by.
Now so were you sort of behind the person in the alley looking past them to the fire truck? What was
Yeah.
your perspective?
Like the person was standing, it wasn't me, I didn't see it. I just saw like a little boy standing in the alley and he was like in the back of the alley and he could see the fire truck coming in.
Wow, that's a lot of detail. So you've got a character now. You've got a little boy specifically. He's kind of in an alley. He's watching this fire truck go past. Was there a particular emotion that you attached to him as you were imagining him standing in that alley?
Frightened, scared, he was alone, so.
Wow. So you're starting to almost get at an interpretation of this poem. That for you it's about being frightened and alone and scared and young as you watch this big fire truck come past. Did you have to do a lot of work to come up with that image? Did you have to sit and brainstorm it, or did that just pop into your mind?
It popped in as you read it.
Okay. So when we just let ourselves pay attention to our visual images, we can not only make connections to difficult text, but it's actually a stepping stone to help us get started on interpreting what this text means. So for Nicole, she's starting to build an argument about this is a poem about loneliness. Something in these words triggered an idea about loneliness and fear for her. Did anybody have a different visual image that kind of created a different tone or a different emotion? Or even the same tone and emotion? Megan?
Well, I kind of got the same tone of like loneliness, but I pictured it was more like the firefighters going past. They looked like they didn't want to go where they were going, but
Oh,
they
interesting.
were on the truck, so they kind of had to.
So, you might not be able to be this specific. How many firefighters were you picturing on the truck? Can you describe a little bit more about where they were, what they were doing?
I pictured just one, and they were like on top of the fire truck, which is not really where people sit, but that's where they were in my image. And he was like,
Okay, pause there for 1 second, because that's a really good point. For how many of you were the firefighters sitting on top of the truck? Just Megan? Okay.
I just don't understand fire trucks.
When is the other time in your life where you might have seen people on top of a fire truck going past, do you think?
Well, in my block, Santa comes by on the fire truck.
Right? Santa Claus comes by on the fire truck and he's sitting on top. For a lot of us, that is one of the most memorable experiences that we've had of a fire truck. And we attach really pleasant memories to it. And so, Megan, even though you're saying, wait, I know the firefighters would be inside the truck, I know that, but I have such a strong past history with this one image that it's shaping the way I see it. Versus if we had someone in here who maybe had experienced a tragedy with fire and had seen fire trucks racing to their house to put out a fire or something like that, very different images might get evoked from this poem, right? Okay, so we can go on talking about this, and then this then becomes our stepping stone for building interpretations, that you're both starting to get to these ideas of fear, loneliness, panic, some sort of darkness. But we've taken the anxiety out of interpreting poetry. We made it easy. All we've told the young children to do, all we've told our middle school students to do, is just pay attention to the connections that they're making to the poem initially and see value in them. And we're also helping them to see that there's no right way to make meaning to a text. That not only should we allow our past experiences and knowledge, all of our schema, not only should we allow that to help us interpret text, but we have to. We have no other way to do it. That's where our meanings come from. So let's build on that now, and let's move to a longer text. We're going to move to Bridge of Terabithia. So I'm going to give you a fresh sheet of paper now. This is something we could do on a different day with students. And we're going to make this a little bit more complicated now because we're going to be dealing with a longer text. So I'm going to ask you to turn this sheet of paper into a storyboard by folding it in half lengthwise and then folding it in half vertically. So if you just, either way is fine, just so that you have 4 squares on your sheet. Depending on how long a text you're dealing with your students, you could turn this into 8 squares. You could have bigger sheets of newsprint paper. There are a million different ways you can approach this, but we're going to do it very simply with just a 4-panel storyboard. Okay? And if you would just number your panels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You want to do this with your middle school students because it will just cut down on confusion later. If you tell them, put this in panel number 2, or put this in panel number 3. Otherwise, students are going to be saying, wait, where do I put this? Do I put it in the same box? Do I put it in a different box? Do I put it on the back? So that will just cut down on some of the questions that you're going to have to deal with. Okay? And we're going to start, as we said, this is the gradual release model. So I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, and then you're going to do it independently. And again, we're just building on visualization to help support accessing prior knowledge, accessing schema, and making text to self-connections. So I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to start with a very small piece. When you do this with students, you want to read maybe a sentence, maybe 2. And then you want to have them stop and visualize. You're trying to teach them that they should instantly start moving into an active reading mode as soon as they read. They should be working on making those pictures, not waiting until things make sense to them. Because oftentimes when students start reading a story, they assume that if the first few sentences, even the first paragraph doesn't make sense, that means they're a bad reader. I don't know what's happening here, so I'm confused, so I'm a bad reader. We have to help them to understand that's exactly what authors want us to do. They want us to be confused. So students who don't know what's going on in the first paragraph, that shows us they're thinking about the story. That's a good reader who's thinking about the story and asking questions. We just have to help them get past that initial anxiety about confusion. and show them that it's okay to have some questions that don't get answered immediately. They will be answered eventually if you have the reading stamina to keep going, okay? All right, so I'm just going to read 2 sentences to you. So once again, close your eyes, and you're going to try to create a picture in your mind. You're going to turn your mental movie cameras on. Your picture might not be complete because we won't have a lot of information to build on. We're just going to start with our first picture, and we'll keep changing it as we get more information. All right, so here's the beginning. Chapter 1, Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. From Bridge to Terabithia. Brum, 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 baribbity, baribbity, baribbity. Good. His dad had the pickup going. He could get up now. Jess slid out of bed and into his overalls. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's all the information you have. That is not a lot to go on, right? So in panel 1, I want you to try to sketch out as best you can. Don't worry if you can't draw well. You can use stick figures. You can label things with words if that helps. Just try to give us a general outline of what exactly you were picturing. What did you picture his overalls looking like? When he said he slid out of bed, what was the room like that you were imagining that bed in? Use as many words as you need to if you can't make it look like it did in your head through pictures. And if it's simpler for you to just use words to describe it, that is fine too. Whatever makes the most sense for you. I'm going to give you about 1 minute more, so just keep that timeline in your mind as you're filling in details. This is just sketching, so you don't have to finish it. Okay, another 10 seconds. And let's do a little snooping. Should we do a little snooping on each other? Could everybody stand up? Just stand up and stay at your desk.
Sorry.
And I'm going to ask you to silently circulate around the room and snoop on each other's work. When I tell you, you can move when I tell you. Now here's what I want you to be thinking about as you're snooping. I want you to be thinking about, good, you're already sort of doing it. Good, I know, it's fun to snoop. I want you to be thinking about what are some patterns you notice across everybody's images. Are there any elements that everybody seemed to picture? And are there elements that seem to be different across everybody's? Just based on those 2 little sentences that I read. And then we'll come back and talk about it. So when I tell you to move, you're going to move. Remember, we're moving silently. We're not making any comments about people's drawing ability, good or bad. This is not a feedback activity, this is a snooping activity. So you want to be sneaky and spy on each other, okay? All right, go snoop. So as you're snooping, let me just process this a little bit. One of the reasons that with middle school students, you would tell them not to make comments good or bad is because oftentimes, if you tell them that they can give positive comments, a few students will be getting lots of positive comments about how beautiful they draw, and other students will get no comments. So even though you're not saying anything negative, the students who don't get any positive feedback feel like it's a critique. And the other thing is, we don't want students to feel like this is an activity about what a good artist you are. You don't need to be able to draw well to be able to make connections and visualize with your text. So we're trying to de-emphasize that. That's why it's important to give that behavioral expectation. So before we move on, did you notice any patterns? What were some of the things that everybody seemed to have in their picture?
Everyone had overalls and a bed.
Okay, so the words that I read, people seemed to put into their pictures. So Tori, everybody had overalls, everybody had a bed. What were some of the differences across these images of rooms? Were there any? Claire?
I focused more on the truck.
Ah, okay. So even though that's something that's sort of happening, if this was a movie, that's something that's happening kind of off screen, that he's hearing the truck. You're picturing what the character's picturing. His father getting in his truck, and getting up. So you've got multiple images going on. Perfectly fine. Anybody else? Did you have other things, or you noticed there was a difference between what you and your classmates were drawing?
I put the boy and the truck in, so like that, like he was looking out the window.
So you had almost like a panoramic shot. So you've got the boy, and then he's out the window with the truck. So we're all framing our movie very differently. These movies would all look pretty different. Did anybody have more than one bed? No. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep reading now. We may have to modify our original picture. If we have to change our picture, does that mean we're wrong and that we read it badly? Or just that we're fixing up our understanding of it as we get more information, right? It means the second one. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to train students. There is no right and wrong with reading, but that you're constantly adjusting your understanding of the reading. You're going back, you're making changes, you're filling in more information. When I read this next sentence, you're going to see that there's more than one child in the room. But with middle school students and elementary school students, when they get to that, they're going to think, oh, I got it wrong. I didn't understand. I didn't know he was in a room with other people. So we have to really mediate that for them and help them to understand that the author's taking us through a journey and we just have to go through it with her, okay? All right, so next sentence. You can close your eyes or you can leave them open as I read this. I'm going to read a longer chunk this time. So there could be multiple pictures in your mind as I read. I'll go back and start from the beginning just so we can make that connection. His dad had the pickup going. He could get up now. Jess slid out of bed and into his overalls. He didn't worry about a shirt because once he began running, he would be hot as poppin' grease, even if the morning air was chill. Or shoes because the bottoms of his feet were by now as tough as worn-out sneakers. Where are you going, Jess? Maybelle lifted herself up sleepily from the double bed where she and Joyce Ann slept. Is your picture starting to change a little bit? Okay, good. Shh, he warned. The walls were thin. Mama would be mad as flies in a fruit jar if they woke her up this time of day. Okay, in panel 2, can you draw your new version of what you're picturing? How has the room changed now that we got more information? Has the lighting in the room changed at all? Do you have a clearer sense of what time of day it is, or what day of the week it is, or what kinds of condition the room would be in? Okay. And I'm going to stop you there again just in the interest of time. How did your idea of the room change now that I gave you some more information to work on? Let's just talk this one through. What does it look like now to you? Claire?
Picture like almost like an attic-y type room, so that it's like shared by all the siblings and the boy.
Why do you think it moved up to the attic now, the room?
Well, he said he doesn't wear shoes when he runs,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe think he doesn't have money for shoes when he runs.
Ah.
So he can't wear them out, so he needs money.
So just by concentrating on your picture, what do we call that when you take little pieces of evidence and you put them together and you make a guess that's not stated in the text? Part of that is text-to-world connections, and it's also an inference, which is based on our text-to-world connections. Our text-to-world connections are where we get the ideas, and the inference is actually making that guess. So this visualizing strategy is not just helping us with basic comprehension, it's helping us with inferences as well, as we start to pay attention to how our pictures have changed. Okay, so let me just talk you through then how the rest of this lesson would go. That's the me part of the lesson, where the teacher's taking most of the responsibility, and I'm walking you through it. And then what you would do is, you're going to give the students a handout of the chapter. I photocopied it. And you'll notice that in portions of the chapter, I have labeled it stop, visualize here. Stop, visualize here. So after you get the students totally engaged in the reading and they're now ready to start reading independently, and you've talked it through so they have a really good sense of the setting and the context of the story, you're going to keep reminding them to stop and visualize, and I'm giving them space to do it right here on the page. But this is the we section. So I'm not going to let them get too far before we stop and we do some more processing activities. We could do some more snooping and let them learn from each other. I could ask students to share, and this is the we part of it, as I'm checking in and making sure that you can do this independently. I've also, on the next page, I've also given them some more specific instructions. So here I wrote, stop, visualize what Jess is imagining while he runs, because it's a difficult part of the story. Jess is running outside, but he's also imagining something that happened before. So it's not exactly a flashback. Two things are happening at once. So part of my visualization instructions are helping them to process the complex organization of the text. Okay? So that's all the we part. We're sharing responsibility. And then when you're ready to give it over to the you part, where students are doing it totally independently, you could either just keep giving them instructions to visualize and tell them to finish the chapter, or you could take these scaffolds away altogether, these reminders to stop and visualize, and say to them, okay, I want you to finish the chapter, there's 5 more pages. I want you to draw a visualization whenever you get a really strong picture in your head. So slowly, piece by piece, they're taking greater ownership of this metacognitive strategy of paying attention to the pictures in your head as a way of comprehending through the text. And then afterwards, you have a great formative assessment. I can collect the chapter from you, I can look at all of your visualizations, and I can assess how well you comprehended the text based on what you were drawing. I now have another great tool to support the reading-writing connection, because I can give this back to you and say, I'd like you to write a summary of chapter 1. All you have to do is write a 1-sentence description of each picture you drew. And that becomes a perfect, concise summary of the entire chapter. Okay? So while this takes a lot of time and we're stopping and stopping frequently, once you make it independent for the students to go through this process, you can move on to other strategies, but they now have ownership of this, and this is going to help support that comprehension piece. Okay? Thanks so much, everybody, for helping to demonstrate these visualization strategies to support comprehension.